I was better than everybody in that draft that wasn't named LeBron, Melo, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Paul. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just me being a Buck. Like I was better than them, and everybody knew that. But whatever. People make decisions. But when I was asking that, I knew that. So then I asked that question to the agents, and if you came in talking about, well, you're gonna be the number 5 pick, or you're gonna be the number 3 pick, or you should be the number 1 pick, I'm like, okay.
You knew they were
have a nice day. Yeah, like you just blowing smoke because I need honesty. When I got to Hargrave with Coach Shepard and Coach Keats, actually was my assistant coach at the time, I asked him, I said, the one thing I want y'all, just be honest with me, man. Like, don't tell me this school likes me when they really don't. Don't tell me these guys are gonna offer me when they're not. Like, just tell me, like, if I'm only gonna be able to go to, the ECUs and Old Dominions of the world, tell me, like, I just didn't want to, because I had seen guys like with their hopes up, I'm going to this school, I'm going to that school, and then it never happened. So I didn't want to be in that situation, and I just demanded that everybody be honest with me. So tell me, like, these teams don't like you, like, this coach doesn't like you. Tell me that, because that also helps me and keeps a chip on my shoulder, edge on my shoulder. I went through it in college when coaches were saying, hey, you're not quite at our level, or you can't play at this level. That's fine. Just when I go up against you, though, it's gonna be tough. And it was the same thing in the NBA when there were guys that was better than me or whatever. All right, we'll see when we get out there. So when I got drafted, I was just happy to be in New Orleans. Like, hey, I'm the 18th pick. I'm in New Orleans. I knew I was going to New Orleans because Bob Bass, who was the GM there, he said to me, he said, I don't know how you're gonna fall to us. He said, I don't know how. And I'm like, okay. He said, but if you're at 18, we're taking you. This was before the workout. And this was before we go in the workout. He's like, if you're there at 18, you're gonna be a New Orleans Hornet. I'm like, that's cool with me, man. Like, that's fine. I was like, that's fine. And Bob has since passed, but I always was thankful to him for that because, he did what I asked, just be honest with me. And, there were other teams that were honest, and it didn't hurt my feelings. Folks around me, my brother was upset about, some of the things that other teams said, but I always took it as you got to take what people honestly feel and then use that to fuel you. And that's what I did. So I was able to outplay, have a better career than most of the guys drafted ahead of me.
Yeah. And not too many of y'all were. It was a loaded class, but only a handful of All-Stars.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. So, and that's probably the greatest class, maybe.
One of them.
One of the greatest classes of all time.
Right.
Right. Yeah, you were one of the All-Stars on there. You could have went back to the Pacers, but you decided to leave, and you didn't take back the $12 million. I remember during that time period, we had there was an AAU tournament or something like that. I was down there, and I was like, yo, Dave, why the hell did you take it? So I remember telling you that at the hotel.
Yeah.
And then you told me something, I still think about it all the time. You said long term is never about the money. Your decision making in that time, what really went into it?
Well, it was a couple things. I was confident with where I was, and at that point in my career, I was very confident and comfortable with where we had kind of situated ourselves financially.
Yeah.
I was also confident that I was making the right decision.
Yeah.
And then I also just wanted to make a basketball decision, but also be a little selfish too, because it was the first time in my life that I made a decision that was totally centered on David.
Yeah.
Like, people don't realize, San Antonio was my favorite team growing up.
Tim Duncan's
my favorite player. Like, I literally idolized that organization, everything about it. Like, sort of my philosophical mind when it comes to basketball is centered around my childhood and watching the Spurs, and watching David Robinson and Tim Duncan and all that stuff. So the opportunity to go there was a selfish one. As soon as we lost in the playoffs.
Did you know you were going to Golden State?
Yeah, I knew I was going. Because Bob reached out while I was on the bus. And I joke with him all the time about that.
Yeah.
He's like, man, you're going to get me in trouble. But literally, because they wanted me to come there the year before, but I'm like, I'm going to the Spurs.
Yeah.
So then when they reached out, I was like, okay, we'll give it a run because, at that time they needed what I could provide. They needed some veteran leadership. They needed a steady locker room presence, and then they needed somebody who could still be productive on the floor in spots. And so I was able to fill my role there, well, but, very rarely do you want to get yourself in a position where you have to make a decision based on financial implications. And I always pride myself on not having to get to that point. It's always good to have that feeling of, people respected what you did, respected the way you carried yourself. And, I tell you all the time, I got in and out of the league unblemished. Was able to get in and get out and remain intact. And, that's something that, like I said, when I mentioned it to you years ago, long term, those are the things that you want to be, you want to have as a part of your legacy.
2 finals runs you had, or where you guys won the 2 chips. Which one was the hardest? I saw the interview where you're like, people will know what we went through in the locker room.
That second one.
That second one was the hardest. What made that the hardest?
Well, the first one, they had just lost the year before.
Okay.
To Brown and them.
Yeah.
And so, when I got there, it was all about get back. Like, man, we got the guys now. We got, they brought in JaVale, myself, and Zaza to sort of beef up that inside presence, but then also add some experience to it. So, that year was just about coming together, really focusing on the task at hand. But that second year, because the expectations were so high and it's so hard to win back-to-back, that year was the tougher year because, we had a stretch where we, were kind of fluttering. We weren't the top seed. We had some injuries we were dealing with. And then we just had some wild stuff happen throughout that season that you just don't expect to deal with. So, being able to, basically reorganize ourselves, refocus, and have a good playoff run, and seal it with a second ring was really a monumental task. Every night you're going to go in and everybody's going to play their best game. Like against the Warriors, guys are going to have their best games or try to have their best games. Coaches are going to try to coach their best games. The scouts are going to try to scout and deliver their best scout reports and there are no secrets. Every one of our games are on TV and people are up, the arenas are packed. So having to live up to that was tough. And then for me physically, it was tougher because, there were stretches during that year where we had to rest certain guys. So my old ass had to play. You know what I mean? Like there was certain stretches of that year where, we had to go and play with lineups that, we didn't know whether or not they would work, but we had to play them because we didn't want to risk Steph now because we wouldn't have them later.
In the playoffs.
Yeah, same thing with Klay and KD and all those great guys.